Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, am I so excited. I cannot tell you how excited I am to bring Major General John Gronski back. He wrote this outstanding book, Sharpened Leadership, and I'm going to tell you what, today's show is going to be so relevant because in light of things that are happening in our world, right? We've had some major things happening in our world. First of all, we've had the pandemic for about 2 years plus, right? And if you've been in business, you've been in crisis, right? But there's also this war that is occurring out in Ukraine, Russian-Ukrainian war. If you wherever you're at in the world, if you have not been watching the news or know what's going on, there's actually a war going on right now, and that's a crisis. What does it take to lead in a crisis? What does it take to have true leadership in a crisis? I've heard people say that leadership emerges in crisis. We're going to ask the general if that's really true or not. Because to me, okay, in my opinion, I think leadership is already there, right? But we find out what kind of leader you are in the midst of a crisis. Because I think if you're waiting for somebody to show up when the crisis happens, I think personally it's too late. But that's just my opinion. Now, General may have another view on that. We're going to ask him that question. That's going to be part of the questions that we're going to ask him. But we're going to talk about how do you lead in a crisis? What does that look like? Right now, listen, we're going to get to him for just a second. Before we do that, we're going to do what we do every week, right? And that is we are 4-part people, and I walk you through your training in the 4 areas of your life. We're going to just check in to see how your training is going. All right. Now, this isn't a judgment zone. This isn't about you, okay, because we're going to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10, or you're going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very good, 10 being outstanding. How is your training going in each area? Now, listen, whatever that number is, that's okay. What I want you to do is have that number to say, okay, this is my starting point so that I can get better from there. That's the whole point, okay? So let's take the physical, right? The truth of the matter is, if you were to evaluate yourself on your physical training every day, ask yourself in the last 7 days, how's my exercise regimen been? How's my diet been? Right? Have I been putting the right fuel into my body? Am I drinking enough water? Am I getting enough sleep? Right? When's the last time you got a checkup? Right? In a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing all those things? Right? And if your number's a 3, listen, I'm not trying to get you from a 3 to a 10 right now. I'm just trying to get you to 3 to 3.5, maybe a 4. Okay, what can you change right now to get that done? All right, first number. Second number, mental training, right? By the way, mental training is something you need to be doing every day. We got to work on growing in our knowledge and understanding, not just of what we do, but what's going on in the world, how what we do applies to the world. Are you a little wiser today? Do you understand how the world works? Do you understand how people work? Are you exercising both halves of your brain? Meaning, are you being a little bit creative, that right side? And are you working on your logical skills on your left side? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate your training? All right, that's 2 numbers. Third number is your emotional training. Folks, we've been in a pandemic for 2 years. I hope you understand that every day we have been in an emotional training. But here's what I want to tell you. We're going to evaluate. I want you to evaluate yourself on these 2 criteria. One is, how well have you been able to, or are you able to control your emotions under pressure and stress? Maybe even hunger. And the second part is, how well are you able to truly tap in and understand the emotions of another person? You see, the point of the matter is, you know what? It's not just enough to be able to say, well, somebody cuts me off in traffic and I can control my emotions. That's great. I'm proud of you. I think that's fantastic because a lot of people can't. But you know what? There's another part of our emotional control that has to be, how well do I truly understand what that person is really saying to me, what they're feeling? But I'm pretty sure the general would say to me that if I can't understand what that person is really saying and feeling to me, I'm not doing a very good job as a leader. Because I think the primary requisite of being a great leader is to be able to listen. I may be wrong, but I think I'm right on this one. So that's your third number. Your fourth number is the spiritual number. And folks, spiritual is not real hard. You might say, I'm not really spiritual. We're all spiritual. Remove the physical, the mental, the emotional. What you have left is spiritual. If you have plans for your future, you have faith. If you have faith, that is spiritual. That's just the fact. The fact of the matter is, here's the truth. When things go south, when things go wrong, when things go bad, guess what? You will run to something to try to get yourself back to peace or to center. Whatever that thing you run to, that is your God, because you believe that that's going to make things better. And that may be God, that may be nature, it may be meditation, it may be something else. I have two questions for you. How is it working, and what do you got to do to change it so it does work? Or do you need to keep searching? Which is the other question. You have four numbers. Those four numbers, I like to say, are like the legs of the chair. If the legs of the chair are uneven, right, we sit on it, we get bad posture over time. By the same token, if the legs of the chair are too low, we can't eat at a normal table so that we can eat nourishing growth and grow nourishing. And speaking of someone who's got all four legs at the right height, and he's sitting solid. His name is Major General John Gronski. He currently serves as a senior mentor for the U.S. Army Mission Command Training Program, which is an adjunct fellow for the Center for European Policy Analysis and president of Leader Groves, which is a leadership development management consulting firm. Now, I want to just tell you this about the general. He has served for over 40 years in the United States Army and in the National Guard. He retired from the Army in June of 2019. In 2005, he was in Ramadi, which was considered to be the bloodiest place on the planet, where he led a brigade of 5,000 soldiers. It was a combination of airmen, Navymen, Army, Marine troops. He also commanded the 28th Infantry Division, which is known as the Bloody Bucket. And from 2012 to 2016, he was the Deputy Commanding General of the U.S. Army in Europe. Listen, he is highly distinguished. His medals are amazing. Bronze Star, Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, Iraq Campaign Medal, Combat Infantry Badge, and the list goes on and on. He has them, and he truly is an American hero. He truly is a world hero. He has his MBA from Penn State Great Valley and a Master of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College. He's a much sought after keynote speaker. I'm just telling you, I've watched his stuff. It's really, really good. And he's a great leadership seminar facilitator. Please, everyone, welcome back to the show, and welcome back again, General. I'm so honored to have you here on A New Direction. Welcome, General John Gronski. Welcome.
Hey, Jay, it's great to be with you. I enjoy your podcast. I love the message you put out, and I'm glad to be part of the program today.
Well, you know what? Thank you very much. The book, I've said it over again. I wrote the review on it. It's simply, in my opinion, it is the #1 leading book on leadership. It is an all-encompassing book, and the general also puts in this book action items at the end of each chapter where you could take an action step into becoming that leader. And General, in light of what we got going on in this world right now, we have a war, and we're coming towards the end, I hope, of the pandemic, but we've been fighting that on our personal scale. And, businesses have been going through their own war as well. So I want to take a general, and then we'll get more focused into what's going on in the world, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about something I said in the introduction. I have a lot of people who will say, well, leadership emerges in crisis. And my opinion is, you better hope you have a leader way before the emergency happens. Do I got that right?
Yeah. I mean, a leader has to set conditions for their organization. So when, inevitably there's going to be a crisis at some point in time, or there's going to be some type of adversity an organization is going to face and will have to overcome. And if a leader doesn't set the conditions and put the foundation in during steady state times, they will flounder during a crisis. I think a perfect example is the pandemic. I mean, we've seen some companies and organizations fail because of the pandemic, and then other ones have been able to work through the issues of the pandemic, and some have even thrived. And I think those companies that made it through and organizations that made it through the pandemic successfully are the ones who had a grounded framework that they were able to rely on when that unexpected crisis hit. So, yeah, am exactly, aligned with what you said, Jay. The framework, the bedrock of that leadership foundation has to be set during steady state. So when you do face adversity, you're going to be able to, fight through that.
So this kind of leads me to a question, and I know that you and I didn't really talk about it, but it just kind of struck me as you were talking. You being in the military, all the training that you do, the boot camps and everything that you do prior to going into war is really to prepare you for a conflict. And when it comes to business, we just kind of go in the door, but we're really pretty ill prepared in reality for conflict. We don't walk into it that way. Right? Because the military prepares you. You're being prepared for that. Hopefully, I think that's what you do. So, what is that bridge for us? What is that bridge? What is our boot camp? What is our training as a business person so that we can train to be the kind of leader that prepares ourselves for conflict?
Yeah, Jay, that is an issue with companies throughout the United States, small companies and large companies. It's actually an issue for law enforcement as well. And I think organizations like that could learn a lot from how the Army transformed itself from the post-Vietnam era Army to the Army that we see today, and the Army that a lot of people have trust in and respect today. And I'll give you an example. Post-Vietnam, we had some very, very, astute, general officers, leaders who understood, at least they were able to understand that the Army had some issues post-Vietnam. They realized they had to transform it if we were going to continue to be a world leader. And there's certain things they did. They changed our doctrine. They brought in equipment. It was called the Big Five, such as artillery systems, air defense systems, the tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle. But one of the key things they did is they instituted leadership training for non-commissioned officers and officers. During the Vietnam era, if you were going to move from, basic enlisted soldier to be a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant, you didn't necessarily get some leadership training before you were going to be put in charge of 4 other soldiers or 10 other soldiers. But post-Vietnam, what we call the non-commissioned officer education system and the officer education system was formulated. So before a non-commissioned officer or commissioned officer was placed in charge of other human beings, they would be given leadership training first. So they would have an idea of how they should lead these other people that they were now going to be in charge of, because instead of just being in charge of themselves, now they were going to be in charge of others. And I've seen from my experience working with the civilian sector, there's not a lot of companies who do that. I was doing some work for a defense contractor in Texas. They had a large factory they were running, about 500 people, 3 shifts, and they were making some armaments there for the military. And the way they would promote somebody into a leadership position, if they saw that a person was doing a good job on the assembly line, they would promote them into a supervisory position where now they were in charge of, 14 or 15 other people. But they never received any leadership training before they were placed in that position. So they had a lot of leadership issues. They had cronyism. They had some retaliation. If an employee spoke up about a leadership issue, sometimes leaders would retaliate against them. All kinds of dysfunctional issues because they never allowed those leaders to go through leadership training first. So I'll pause there, see if you have a comment or question on that.
Well, I do, because I don't think, I know that there are, we talk about leadership training on the civilian level and in the business level, But I don't think they're all created equal. I'm just going to be really honest with you, having been out there in the speaking world. I don't think that's true. Because I'm not sure that often when I've gone to leadership conferences, we never talk about preparing for, what are we doing regularly to prepare for conflict? When I open up this show, right, I walk people through their training and physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right? But there's a part of me that, as I was thinking about this show, that we need to be preparing ourselves. What are we doing to prepare yourself, maybe in those 4 areas, and maybe you have an actionable item for us in the leadership area, especially preparing for conflict and crisis?
Yeah, well, I think all that ties into being a good leader. Being resilient, being able to develop yourself from a spiritual, mental, emotional, capacity is extremely important in order to build up your own resiliency, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, having the courage to move out of your comfort zone and try different things and ask people for what their opinion is, and maybe, allowing yourself to use different mental models. I mean, that's all important. From leadership competence perspective, understanding how to make decisions, and as a leader, developing a culture within your organization so people who work for you feel empowered and comfortable with making decisions at their level. And mentoring people and helping people see what a decision-making process looks like. So all of those things factor into creating a good foundation for an organization. So when you do hit a crisis, you're going to be able to overcome that. And I think I'm a big believer, and I was always a believer in my work in the military and my work in the civilian sector, in empowering people who work for me to be able to display initiative. And the reason that's important is because sometimes, pandemic again, a perfect example, you're going to be separated from people. You're going to be isolated to a degree, but the organization still has to move forward. And if people were not empowered to display initiative during steady state times, they're not all of a sudden going to be great at displaying initiative when there's a crisis. The same with decision making. You have to allow people to make decisions when you're in steady state. So when there's a crisis situation and people are isolated and distributed, they're going to be comfortable with making those decisions. So it's really all about establishing that foundation, steady state, so you could thrive and survive when you hit a crisis.
I know I didn't ask you this question. I should have. But do you offer leadership training to companies and things like that? I should have asked you that before the show. I never did.
No, absolutely, I do. As a matter of fact, just last week, I conducted leadership training for sports coaches from a university. I've done a lot of work for Fortune 500 companies in terms of leadership training, conducting leadership assessments, and I've actually done quite a bit of work for law enforcement.
Okay.
Law enforcement has been going through some tough times, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, and many law enforcement agencies have identified that they've been promoting people into leadership positions without training them on how to be effective leaders first. And so I've been doing quite a bit of leadership and resiliency training for law enforcement departments, which is very rewarding to me because I think the job they do is so precious for our communities. They put their life on the line every day. So extremely important to work with those law enforcement professionals. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I appreciate you doing that. I have friends that are Leos, and so I'm that just makes my heart happy. I got to be honest with you, General. It really does. So let's talk about the next steps. If you had is there some actionable items that you could give leaders right now who maybe aren't as prepared, to maybe, they've either come out of the crisis, because we got people who are starting companies, or maybe is there something that you could give them? Is there some encouragement, or is there something that you would say to them that may be helpful in terms of coming through crisis, being prepared for crisis? Is there some actionable thing that you would suggest to them?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, how should a leader conduct themselves during a crisis? I mean, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, that it's all about creating that foundation for your organization during steady state. So making sure people understand what your purpose is, with your organization's purposes, what your vision is, what your values and principles are, and communicate those things on a regular basis. It shouldn't be some values that you write down 3 to 5 values, put them on a poster, stick it on a wall, and never talk about them. You've got to have conversations about those things prior to a crisis. So when a crisis occurs, they're grounded in the people who work for you. So that's one of the first things you could do. When a crisis does happen, I mean, people are going to be looking to the leader to be a rock, not a pile of sand that's just falling apart. I like to say that leaders do not have to be great all the time, but leaders have to be great when it matters. And again, when there's a crisis, it matters. And people look to that leader to be a rock. So again, not losing your head, staying calm, realizing that there's certain external things that you can't control. External things that you can't control, pandemics. Another external thing you can't control, geopolitical situations that are happening, 4,000 miles away. Those are some things you can't control, but you could control certain things that are going on in your organization. For example, making sure the people who work for you feel safe, and you can help them feel safe by communicating to them, not only communicating the good news, but also, and probably more importantly, communicating the bad news. Because when you don't communicate effectively to those you lead, especially if there's a crisis, people are going to start making up their own narrative. And the narrative they make up is probably going to be worse than what the actual situation is. And again, if you think of it, if you fail at communicating well, it creates uncertainty in the organization. People become discouraged, people become confused. And if you're a leader and you don't know what the situation is, I think you need to call your people together and let them know, hey, I don't have all the facts yet. I really don't know. We're trying to develop the situation. As soon as we find out more, I will inform you. But don't let not knowing be a reason not to communicate with people. Sometimes, it's a good idea to communicate to the people that, hey, I don't know right now, but we're trying to figure it out. So I think those are some of the key things leaders need to do when faced with a crisis situation. And I could name several other things as well.
His name is General John Gronski. The book Sharpened Leadership, and it is, I'm telling you, it is really that good. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Folks, I got 2 sponsors. One is Epic Physical Therapy. They are my physical therapists. Look, I've had a number of surgeries. I have done a lot of stupid in my life physically. I'm just telling you. I've had my shoulders rebuilt. I've had several knee surgeries because I just refuse to quit. And I like to play a little recklessly. That's really the truth. And you know what? They have helped me get back in the game. Right? They help me to get back to deadlifting and squatting and bench pressing and all the crazy other things that I do. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and your epic results, just start at Epic Physical Therapy. That's epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Kraft and Team Realtors for more than 35 years. Do you know what her clients call her? The legend of customer service. Matter of fact, her first client from 1985 still comes back to see her today. Why do people from over 35 years ago still come back? It's because she means something to them. And I promise you that the people that she has working for her have the same purpose and they have the same mentality that she did, because here's their number one rule. You know what? It's about people and the relationship. That's it. Right? You know what? Because here's the deal. Selling homes, anybody can do that. But developing a relationship and making it meaningful, well, that goes far beyond everything else. So when you're ready to sell your home or maybe buy your next home, start with Linda Kraft at Team Realtors. You can learn more by going to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction. Is it okay if I call you friend, General?
I feel like, yeah, we're friends. Absolutely.
I think I like to call you friend. It makes me feel good inside. I think we are friends. I mean, we get to chat a little bit before the show. People don't know that, a little after show, and we've done that a couple of times, and it's also by email. Book is Sharpened Leadership. It's absolutely fantastic. It's my number one leadership book. I highly recommend it. You can find my review on Amazon. I'm going to be writing another review on Goodreads. So if you're a Goodreads reader, I'll be writing a second review of this book. Again, it is that good, and I enjoyed it so much. So, General, let's talk. Let's just move on a little bit here. How do we keep people together in a crisis? Because sometimes what happens is we panic, right? When, I'm thinking about several things. I'm thinking about, people leaving their job or ghosting their job. I'm thinking about, I'm aware of that people in the Ukraine right now, some of them are just scattering. They're getting out, and for good reason. Sometimes it's for a good reason, but sometimes as a leader, during crisis, keeping people together can be a really difficult thing. How does a leader keep people together in a crisis?
Yeah, I think one of the things is a leader has to allow themselves to be available and to be approachable. And I think President Zelensky has been demonstrating some very skillful ways to lead during a crisis. For example, him being out there on the street talking to his soldiers and the civilians that are out there, him visiting a hospital. When there's a crisis going on, that's when a leader needs to go to the point, the tip of the spear, the place where the action is occurring, be visible, let people see them. That is not the time to go into your bunker and hunker down. That is time to be out there, and also to continue to communicate your message and your purpose to people. I mean, Zelensky is continuing to tell the people of Ukraine, hey, continue to fight. Let's stay together. He's been telling them, hey, this is going to be very tough. It's going to be very long. But we all appreciate liberty, democracy, the sovereignty of our country. And that is what we're fighting these invaders for. So again, just communicating purpose and make sure people understand the reason for being and the reason why you need to be able to continue to stay together to make it through those tough times. So I think the big thing, be approachable, be out there, communicate. Those things are key.
In chapter 14 of this book, which is entitled Leading with Purpose, and I do not want to neglect this because you brought it up and it reminded me of this chapter. When you were in Ramadi, which was to be like one of the bloodiest places on the planet, it was considered to be the bloodiest place on the planet at the time. You said, and I quote, as the brigade manager, you were responsible as the leader of the military unit to craft the purpose for why our brigade was deployed and communicated and need to communicate that to the men and women. And here was the purpose you articulated. You said, quote, the reason we are here in Iraq fighting the insurgents and terrorists is to keep our families, friends, and all Americans safe back home. This is known as commander's intent. First of all, I don't think we really understand sometimes that I think we try to communicate a purpose, but I don't think we communicate the why very well. Do I have that wrong? Because I feel like we confuse that. We think we know our purpose when we're actually communicating a result. We'll say, well, my purpose is to, make X number of whatever. Well, that's a result. That's not your why. It goes deeper than
you're exactly right, Jay. In the military, we have something called a mission statement, and a mission statement essentially has a task and a purpose to it, and the what and the why. And when I'm working with leaders, whether it be military, law enforcement, civilian leaders, and in civilian companies, I like to ask this question. What do you think is more important, the what or the why? The right answer to that is the why. If people, and Nietzsche, who was a philosopher, he said, if you understand your why, you could bear any how. And I think that's interesting. And again, looking at the situation in Ukraine, if the Ukrainian people understand their why are they fighting, then they could understand the what and the how of what's going on in terms of the terror that is embracing their country. So yeah, absolutely. Purpose is powerful. When people understand the why behind what they're doing, then they have the empowerment to achieve that. I'll give you an example. Let's say, Jay, the what is to, in a military terms, the what is to seize a particular objective, and the why you have to do that is to protect the military unit to your right flank. Well, the why is the most important thing. Whether you seize that objective or not isn't the important thing. The important thing is, what are you doing to protect that military unit to your right flank?
Right.
If you could do that even without seizing that objective, you have accomplished what we call in the military the commander's intent. So that's why is so important. I can't think of a good civilian analogy right now, but I'm sure a lot of the people that are out there listening to this podcast could probably understand how that would work in whatever line of work they're doing.
Well, I think we do it all the time. I'm going to give this example that I think I've heard somewhere, and that is, if you're a computer company, we often think, well, we make great computers. That's our why. But that's not your why. That's what you do. That's your what. That's what you do, is we make great computers. And we often think our why is because we make great computers. But our why is we actually educate a world to make them more efficient. Right? That's really the why. If you're good, do I have that right? Maybe is that a pretty good?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, people have to understand if you really want people to be excited about the organization that they're working for or working with, they have to understand that what they're doing is for a purpose much greater than themselves. So, I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to work for a company that makes a computer, or do you want to work for a company that educates young children?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, you're making a computer, that's the what, but the why is so you could put these computers in the hands of children, and they're going to have, the world at their fingertips. Literally, they're going to have more information at their fingertips than the president of the United States had, 20 years ago.
Right.
There's just so much information out there when you have the right tool in your hand. So absolutely, I want to work for a company that wants to educate children.
Right.
Not just build a computer box.
You quote Viktor Frankl in this chapter from his book Man's Search for Meaning, and he basically says men and women can endure almost any hardship if they understand their purpose. Yeah,
and basically he was quoting Nietzsche when he said that. If you understand your why, you could bear almost any how. And actually, I've read Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he specifically quotes Nietzsche in that regard. And that is some of the way that he was able to endure that hardship of the Nazi concentration camp that he was in for many years, and how he was able to overcome those circumstances and get out. And he had the wherewithal then to forgive his captors, and to really make a life for himself where he impacted so many other people in a very positive way.
I'm going to talk about this in terms of everything that we've got going on, both business and what we've got going on in Ukraine, and also coming through the pandemic. Because in chapter 15, you talk about championing execution. And you have this model known as understand, visualize, describe, direct, and assess.
Yeah.
And to me, when I reread the book again, it seemed to me that in crisis, it's even more critical that you be on top of these on top of this model in these 5 areas.
Yeah. Again, for a leader to put out guidance, first of all, they have to understand the situation. And you don't do this in a vacuum. You could do this with the team you have constructed around you to try to understand, hey, what is the real problem set here? And you've got to be able to understand the problem before you have a chance to solve it. So, understand is certainly the first step. And then visualizing. Then a leader really has to clearly see not only the end state in their mind, but all of the actions that are going to be occurring leading up to that end state that you're looking for. So that's what the visualize is about. And then you've got to describe it to those people around you. You've got to be able to communicate your vision to other people. And, I think vision is so important. And I like to tell people that I'm training, there's a very simple acronym you could use as you're creating your vision for the organization. And it's SUIIF. A vision should be a simple, unique, ideal image of the future. So when I say simple, it's got to be something that somebody who's just starting in your organization could understand, and somebody who's been in your organization for 15 years could understand. So it's got to be simple enough for even people in your organization at a lower rank or very little experience, they could understand it. It's got to be unique. It's got to be unique for your organization. You've got to be able to put it into your organization's own words. It should be ideal, so it should be, seeking the ideal or perfection or excellence to some degree. And then it's got to be an image, it's got to be something people could see in their mind. And then it's got to be future oriented. So again, understand, visualize, describe in those terms, and then direct. That means, once a leader makes a decision, you don't just, throw the decision over the wall like a sack of potatoes and walk away. The leader has to empower others to carry out that decision, but the leader has to be available. So if somebody gets confused, if somebody bumps into a stone wall, if somebody needs an obstacle removed, that only the leader has the authority to remove that obstacle. If somebody needs resources that only the leader could provide, you've got to be available. So when people bump into those forks in the road or those stumbling blocks, you're there to help to continue to guide them. And then assess. It's in the military, we call it an after action review. And that's at various times throughout, the process of execution. You kind of pause for a minute and you go through a process of, hey, what have we done so far that's working well that we want to continue to do? What aren't we doing well that we need to improve upon? And then what lessons have we learned that we could apply? And that's what the assess is really all about. So again, that understand, visualize, describe, direct, assess, I think is a very effective model, especially for a mid-level or a senior leader to use.
But to me, this is exactly what's happening in that Vladimir Zelensky has to be doing right now, isn't it? But it's happening in a much faster, in faster real time, right?
I mean, absolutely. He is. I mean, I don't know if he was trained on that process,
right?
But it appears as though he's got a process at least similar like that in his mind that he's working through,
right?
Because he's doing a very effective job, I think, communicating and then getting out there and inspiring people with his personal presence.
I think it's, we're going to take a break here real quick, but I think it's amazing that he's utilizing social media the way he's used it to let the world, he's letting his people and the world all know. I think it's been incredible because it's the first we've ever seen, at least at my end, and I can recall, and that we've actually seen that kind of leader under this kind of pressure take to the use of social media to let people know what's going on.
Yeah, he's under an incredible amount of pressure, and I think a lot of it has to do with his experience as an actor, as a comedian. I think he probably used social media because he had his own business. He was promoting himself.
Right.
If you're an actor or a comedian, I mean that's kind of like your job. So you've got to promote your own talent in that way. So he's probably had some experience doing that in his civilian job prior to becoming president.
Yeah, I think it's outstanding. Now, listen, folks, stay with us because right after the break here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these two leaders, Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, and what their styles of leadership, and the general's going to help us do that. We're going to be right back. You're listening to General John Gronski right here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, listen, my two sponsors, which I love dearly, Epic Physical Therapy. Look, here's the deal. They offer the most top-of-the-line advanced equipment, the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, the Game Ready, which is just ice and compression. It's awesome. The trained and certified most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. That's just a few. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, they gave it to me. They'll give it to you. Go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Kraft and Team Realtors for more than 35 years, they've been helping the entire world, you know what, buy and sell a home. How do they do that? Well, here's how they do it, right? People they are connected with the best professionals wherever you live. I'm just telling you, they are. And they're unbiased because they're privately owned and operated. So when you're looking for a professional in your area, regardless of where that area is, start with Linda Kraft and Team Realtors. She will put you in touch with a professional like her who is, you know what, all about the relationship, who will help you, right, sell your home or buy your home. So when you're ready to do that, start with Linda Kraft and Team. That's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Major General John Gronski. The book, let's not forget that, because the book is outstanding. Matter of fact, we've been actually talking through the book a little bit, Iron Sharpened Leadership. I know that people are chomping at the bit here. General, they want you to talk about what's going on in the Ukraine, and I want to devote the last minutes of the show, 15 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes of the show to that. And one of the things that you brought to me when we were going back and forth in email is you wanted to talk about the style of leadership, I believe, if I've got that right. I think I got that right. In regard to how each leader is leading, that being the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's compare and contrast the two leadership styles.
Well, I think the big thing when you look at Putin and you see the failure of the Russian ground forces, they've been stalled now almost since the beginning of the invasion. Ukraine has been very successful lately with counterattacks against those Russian forces. The Russian forces have not been trained well in terms of their tactics. They've had very poor logistics. There's even been some reports today of Russian soldiers actually stealing food from Ukrainian displaced persons. I mean, they don't even have their own food being logistically supplied to them. They've had, they've been running out of fuel. And so, why has the Russian ground forces been performing so poorly? And I think a lot of it has to do with Putin's leadership. He does not encourage initiative. He's very autocratic. People are afraid to come, people on his leadership team are afraid to come up to him and tell him what the truth is. This is even before the invasion. He was misinformed. He thought the Ukrainians were going to lay down their arms and welcome him in and not fight, and that the Ukrainians would have very weak will to defend their own sovereignty. I mean, all that was completely wrong. And it's because Putin is a leader who has isolated himself. He's done very ruthless things in terms of taking steps to keep himself in power. We talk about toxic leaders. Putin is a toxic leader on steroids. So it's no surprise that when you have a toxic leader like that, you're going to have corruption in the government. I think a lot of the corruption in the Russian government is one of the reasons why his military is not very ready. I think a lot of money that he may have thought was being spent on military equipment was really lining people's pockets along the way, where because of the corrupt nature of his government. And really, some people have argued that Putin rules Russia more like a mafia boss than he does like a president of a country. So again, you think of every poor leadership trait a toxic leader could have, and Putin demonstrates that. Zelensky, on the other hand, again, he didn't. I don't know a lot about his background. I do know he was an actor. I do know he was a comedian. Ukraine has had a reputation for having corruption within the Ukrainian government, and Zelensky, I think, rightly identified that, and that's one of the platforms he campaigned on when he was running for president. He campaigned on a platform of, hey, when I become president, I am going to end the corruption. Now, did he do that when he became president? I'm sure he didn't do it completely. I'm sure there were still some corrupt practices occurring within the Ukrainian government, because that's not something you could just push a switch and it's going to end. But this, and some people will criticize him because he seemed to not believe that the Russians were going to attack his country even as late as 24 hours, 48 hours before the invasion actually took place. However, once the invasion occurred, he did not back down. He stood his ground. He inspired his people to stand their ground. He would be out there on the street demonstrating that he was courageous. I think one of the great lines when the United States offered to, whisk him and his wife and children out of the country, he said, "I need ammunition. I don't need a ride." I mean, that quote is going to go down in history. And his wife and children are still in Ukraine. It's not only Zelensky who is remaining there. His wife and children are still there. So could you imagine if you're some family struggling because your apartment just got bombed by the Russians and by Putin? You could think, wow, well, the president still has his wife and kids in this country. So it's a way to galvanize the people and inspire the people, because you're not asking for any special privileges because you're the leader of that country. You are in the same danger that everybody else is, and your wife and your children are in the same danger as everybody else. So again, you're looking at somebody who I think is a character-based, inspirational, transformational leader in Zelensky, and somebody who is an autocratic tyrant, no regard for human life, no regard for human rights, a toxic leader on steroids in the person of Putin. So I think again, when you see pictures, you see Zelensky sitting at a table with his leadership team around him. You see Putin sitting at a table, and his minister of defense is about 40, 50 feet away down at the other end of a very long table. I mean, he's just so isolated. It's because he can't trust anybody, because, acting as he is doing, of course, he's concerned that somebody might try to pull a trigger or pull a knife out and try to do away with them. So again, just a contrast in leadership styles, one being very transformational and inspiring, the other one being very toxic and autocratic.
I don't mean to try to compare, but this seems very similar to what you were involved in Iraq.
Well,
there seems to be some similarities. Am I okay there?
Yeah, I think you're okay there. I mean, if you look at Al Qaeda in Iraq, I mean, they were tyrants. They had no regard for human life. They would institute attacks and roadside bomb attacks without regard for civilians who might be caught in the line of fire there. But the main thing I wanted to point out between Zelensky and Putin is look at the results. Some people say to me, hey, why not be a toxic leader? Why not treat people without dignity and respect in my organization? Because I could get results that way. And I like to say, yeah, you might get results for a short amount of time, but if you really want long-term successful results, being a toxic leader is not going to achieve that. And I think we could see that with Putin, because he's been such an autocratic, toxic leader. His military is failing miserably. And then you look at Zelensky. Once this war commenced, once the Russian invasion commenced into the sovereign territory, Zelensky rose to the occasion. He's being a great leader when it matters, and he is galvanizing the people around him, explaining what the purpose is, and really helping that will of the Ukrainian people stay strong. So again, if you're a character-based transformational leader, you're going to be able to inspire your organization to have strong will and strong beliefs and understand what their true purpose is. And if you're a toxic leader, that is not going to occur. You're going to have people not having the will, not understanding what the purpose is, or not seeing that the purpose is a purpose of something greater than themselves. And you're going to ultimately have failure.
Yeah, I think I was speaking more of Saddam Hussein. Actually.
Oh, I get it. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and again, Putin is going to go down in history aligned with people like Hitler, Stalin, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Assad in Syria. I mean, Putin is going to be right in that lineup, with that rogues gallery, and it's just a terrible thing that he's doing to those people in Ukraine.
Well, you said something. You said it twice, maybe three times, and I want to go back to what you just said in the previous, and that is leading in isolation. That seems to be a really important piece of this, because it's almost like you're saying you can't lead in a vacuum.
No, you can't lead in a vacuum, and you've got to allow yourself to be approachable. You've got to allow yourself to be a leader that people around you feel comfortable speaking up and telling you the truth. Because there's various ways to isolate yourself. You could isolate yourself physically from those you lead, and you could isolate yourself emotionally and mentally from those you lead. And Putin is doing it in every way.
Yeah, I think there's something. I think there's something there. There's a lot of tremendous lessons here for people to learn if they'll pay attention. Right. I think sometimes we get so caught up into the tactics and what's happening is we're not paying attention to the lessons to be learned here from these two men and these two leaders, because you got to make a decision. You're going to have to make a decision at some point in your life. And I don't care how old you are, folks. I don't care if you're a teenager listening to the show or you're, if you're 80 or 90 years old listening to the show. At some point in time, you're going to have to make a decision of what kind of leadership you're going to express towards others. And I think there's so many lessons. And I think that isolation lesson is one. But then I think the lesson on the other side, the Zelensky lesson, is there is a lesson of resiliency here. And I have said it over and over, and I don't think you and I have talked about it, but when I have talked leadership, I've said I could teach you a lot about psychology, but you have to live resilience. I can't teach you.
And with resilience, you need that positive energy, that spirit of optimism, believing that tomorrow is going to be better than today, but having a plan to go along with that optimistic attitude. Again, that positive energy, being somebody who could energize people around you rather than being an energy sponge and sapping the energy, from the room when you walk into it. I like to say, do you want to be the leader, a type of leader who brightens up every room when you leave it? Hopefully not. You want to be the type of leader who brightens up every room when you enter it. Fitness, and you talk about that at the beginning of your podcast, Jay. When you talk about the spiritual fitness, emotional, mental, physical, all of that. So I'm a big believer in fitness in those 4 areas, and we have to continue to try to sharpen ourselves there. Another interesting quote I heard the other day that I really like, somebody, and again, when it applies to anybody, really, the quote is, stay ready. That way you don't have to get ready, so keep yourself ready. So when a crisis occurs, you all of a sudden don't have to start from square one. You're already, up there, and you use that level 1 through 10 analogy, I think. Is it 1 through 10 or 1 through 5?
1 through 10.
Yeah,
5,
1 through 10.
5 is average. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, stay ready. Then you don't have to worry about getting ready. And then the whole thing about vulnerability, allowing yourself as a leader to be vulnerable. And that means, being able to move out of your comfort zone, to try different things, to stress yourself a bit during steady state. So when the stress of a crisis occurs, you're ready for that. Asking other people what their opinion is. Let them, just because you're the leader doesn't mean you have all the answers. So allow yourself to be vulnerable by asking other people, hey, what do you think? And then also being vulnerable by sharing stories with people. What kind of stories? I'm talking about stories about times that you made a mistake and you were able to overcome it. Times you've failed and you were able to rise above those failures. And also share stories with people about where you came from. Most of us came from humble beginnings, and it's good to share stories with people and let them know, the humble beginnings that you started with, and how you were able to overcome those humble beginnings to rise to a position of leadership in your organization. I think, again, Zelensky, a man of humble beginnings, being an actor, not being some type of, executive in a company or scientist or professor or what have you, relatively humble beginnings. And now he's president of the country. And I think he's leading with that sense of humility, which is very important.
General, I've had a great time on the show. We've been on an hour. It's been a lot of fun again. And we may have to do a part 3 if you're up for it sometime.
Hey, Jay, I love having these dialogues with you, and anytime you ask me and I'll be here.
Well, I thank you so much. Tell people how they can get a hold of you, your websites, any way they can get a hold of you, because if they should be talking to you about leadership. And I think right now is a great time.
Yeah, I think the best way to get a hold of me is jump on my website. It's very easy, johngronski.com. JOHNGRONSKI.com. So that's an easy way. Jump on my website. There you could find links to my social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. So you could do that, and you'll see my address, my email address there. You even have my phone number there. I have people reach out to me all the time that are either transitioning out of the military or transitioning out of law enforcement and looking to go into maybe the next chapter of their life. And anytime somebody reaches out to me and wants a little bit of advice, just wants to talk, I'm always willing to do that for people, because I believe the more you give, the more you get back. So again, I encourage any of your listeners, reach out to me. You jump on my website. You could also, purchase a copy of my book, and I'll hand sign the book and get it in the mail to you. So always glad to have people reach out, and always glad to. You mentioned it earlier, relationship building, to build those relationships with other people.
His name is General John Gronski. I told you it was going to be awesome, wasn't it? You know what? Listen, folks, this is the show, but here's the deal. You are in control of 2 things at all times, regardless of your circumstances. That is your attitude and your effort. Get a hold of them, because the fact of the matter is it may be tough, but you can always control your attitude, and you can always control how much effort you give. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great show. It's going to be another great book. And as I say to you every week, ciao, everybody.